After 10 years of marriage, she only knew how to have children. When she asked for money, she was slapped by her husband. She became a legendary talent and an emotional consultant for all the women in Shanghai. Among the female writers in the Republic of China, Zhang Ailing was famous for her aloofness and arrogance. She always disdained to be compared with other female writers, but Su Qing was a little special in her eyes. Zhang Ailing even said in public, "I can't be proud of comparing me with Bingshan and Bai Wei. I am willing to be compared with Su Qing." What is so special about Su Qing that Zhang Ailing, who thinks highly of herself, recognizes her from the bottom of her heart? This has to start with Su Qing's autobiographical novel 10 Years of Marriage. This novel created a legend in the Shanghai publishing industry at that time. Her fame also surpassed Zhang Ailing for a time and became an emotional consultant for all the women in Shanghai. But the content of 10 Years of Marriage involves cheating, domestic violence, and divorce with 3 children. These are all true portrayals of her unfortunate marriage. -1 in 1914. Su Qing was born in a scholarly family in Yin County, Ningbo, Zhejiang. Her father, Fang Pu, went to Columbia University to study the year she was born, and did not return until 5 years later. So Su Qing lived with her grandmother until she was 5 years old. After her father returned to China, he worked in a bank in Shanghai. And then he took his 5-year-old daughter Su Qing to live with him. Her father attached great importance to her education and was particularly strict. In the eyes of young Su Qing, her father always had a gloomy face, and she began to miss the days when she was free with her grandmother. Su Qing's parents were arranged to marry, and because they lacked a common language, their married life was not harmonious, especially after the bank where her father worked went bankrupt. He drank every day to relieve his sorrow due to debts and pressures from all aspects, and he often lost his temper. He eventually became seriously ill and died without treatment. The father, who was originally the pillar of the family, passed away just like that, and the mother took on the burden of raising children alone. But even if life was difficult, the mother insisted on supporting Su Qing to study. Su Qing's writing is delicate. Her words are clear, lively, frank, and plain. She expresses the complicated family affairs of the past 10 years in the simplest language. This is not only her literary language, but also includes her careful observation and logical thinking process. I really appreciate her opening chapter describing the wedding, which vividly describes the old wedding scene in Jiangsu and Zhejiang in the early 20th century, making people feel like they are there in person. Before the first love, girls often have their own idols and compare the object of their first love to an idol. Her idol turned out to be Zhao Yan in the 3 Kingdoms, with a pink face and red lips, white satin armor, and many embroidered pennants on his back. She wrote, "From then on, I fell in love with Zhao Yan and dreamed about him day and night." She even recited the part about Zhao Yan in the 3 Kingdoms, which shows how much effort she put in. It truly reflects an honest and flawless girl's yearning for life, longing for love, and desire for a better life. When Su Qing was in middle school, she had grown into a beautiful lady. When she graduated from junior high school, the school rehearsed the drama The Peacock Flies Southeast, which allowed her to meet her future husband Li Qinhu. Not long after, Li Qinhu's family came to propose marriage. Su Qing's mother was very satisfied with the marriage. After all, the other party's family was well off, and her daughter could at least live a good life if she married him. The other party would also give her a considerable betrothal gift, which would not only reduce the pressure of life, but also provide a place for her son's tuition. But the mother asked her daughter to finish her studies before getting married, and the Li family readily agreed and was willing to take full responsibility for Su Qing's tuition and expenses. The marriage of the two was thus settled. Later, Su Qing was admitted to the Foreign Language Department of National Central University, which was also the top university in the Republic of China. With her outstanding talent and beauty, she won the reputation of Queen of Ningbo in college, and more people pursued her. At that time, Li Qinhu was studying in another school. He also heard the name of his fiancée Queen of Ningbo. He was worried that his fiancée would be snatched away by someone else, so he urged Su Qing to marry him as soon as possible. After several urgings from her husband's family, Su Qing and Li Qinhu finally entered the palace of marriage. Su Qing, who had just got married, spend a short and sweet time. Not long after, she became pregnant. Her parents-in-law took good care of her and hoped that she could give birth to a son to carry on the family line of the Li family. Su Qing was forced to interrupt her studies because of her pregnancy. Not long after, she found out that her husband had another woman outside. She was very angry, but when she thought of the situation in her natal family and saw that she was still pregnant, she had no confidence to tear her face with others. She could only suppress her anger and grievances and comfort herself that her husband would change his mind after the child was born. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Su Qing gave birth to a daughter. Her status in the family plummeted. Her husband not only did not change his mind, but became even worse. Her parents-in-law, who usually took good care of her, also looked unhappy and were even unwilling to hold the newborn granddaughter. Su Qing's mother knew that her daughter had been wronged. Even though the family was not rich, she asked her second aunt to help make hundreds of clothes and sent them to her husband's family as a full-month gift for her granddaughter. But her husband's family thought that there was nothing to celebrate about having a daughter, and they didn't even hold a full-month wine. Su Qing knew her mother's good intentions and comforted her mother that she lived well in this family and that she would be at ease to be a good mother and a good daughter-in-law. So after Su Qing gave birth to the child, she did not continue her studies, but stayed at home to take care of her husband and children and serve her parents-in-law. Sadly, Su Qing gave birth to 4 daughters in a row, and her status in her husband's family was getting worse day by day. She was ridiculed and made things difficult for her until she finally gave birth to a son in 1942. Su Qing thought that after giving birth to a son, her status would be improved and her husband would pay more attention to her. However, she did not expect that Li Qin, who was still the playboy who only knew how to spend money every day. He had no ability to support the family and was very face-conscious. Every time Su Qing asked him for money, he never gave her a good face. Once, Su Qing told him that there was no money to buy rice at home. Li Qin, who slapped her and said to her, "You are so bad at asking for money. It's better to give it to a dancer than to you." For this slap woke Su Qing up completely. She finally saw clearly that she had lived a humble and compromised marriage for 10 years. Even though she gave birth to a son, she did not win the respect of her husband and parents-in-law. Instead of relying on men every day, she might as well rely on herself. So she resolutely divorced her husband and took away her 3 children. In order to support herself and her 3 children, she could only work hard to write and live a life of selling articles. She also wrote about her marriage in the novel 10 Years of Marriage, which caused a sensation in the literary world as soon as it was published. 36 editions were issued, creating a miracle in the Shanghai publishing industry at that time. Su Qing's fame even surpassed Zhang Ailing for a time, and the women in Shanghai regarded her as an emotional consultant. Gold will always shine. After the divorce, she did not become depressed. 2 years later, she founded Heaven and Earth magazine, and later founded Little Heaven and Earth magazine, as well as Shanghai Publishing House. She opened up the situation and occupied a place in the Shanghai literary and art circles. Writer Wang Enyu once said, "If you can see Su Qing clearly, you can probably understand the female citizens of Shanghai." I said, "If you can still understand Su Qing's 10 years of marriage, you can probably understand the life of female citizens in Shanghai." Su Qing wrote for a living. She firmly grasped the reader's ideas and catered to the needs of the public in terms of material selection and themes, which made her gain fame and wealth. The public also particularly liked to read the atmosphere of the city life in her writing, and she always maintained this style. Zhang Ailing also used high-minded but low skill to describe Su Qing's works, believing that her works were completely close to the hearts of the public, and even seemed to grow out of their hearts. Zhang Ailing looked down on all living beings and was detached from the secular world, while Su Qing was one of the living beings who were deeply trapped in the secular world. Unfortunately, Su Qing's life was not smooth sailing from then on because of the appearance of Chen Gongbo. Her reputation was ruined from then on because Chen Gongbo was a famous trader at the time, and Su Qing was already a public figure. At that time, she had a close contact with Chen Gongbo and talked about the topic of sex in her articles. As a result, she was crowned with the title of literary prostitute, not only ruining her reputation, but also completely collapsing her career. There is a passage in the book, "I need a young, beautiful, passionate man who can sleep with me in bed at night without talking much, and we can understand each other, soul and soul, body and body, forever merge and embrace each other." Because of this passage, it caused a lot of criticism at the time, and some people even attacked her as a literary prostitute. I think such comments are unfair to her. She was just exploring and seeking spiritual and physical needs in her failed marriage, and she confessed them to the readers without any taboos. Her honesty and straightforwardness in writing are her original writing style, which has nothing to do with literary prostitutes. This work not only writes about the lives of women, but also spends a lot of space to write about the male protagonist, Changshan, who has worked hard, struggled, and fought in society to maintain this small family. He has been a middle school teacher, a chief of a foreign company, the director of the legal department of a foreign company, and has done business with the help of a manager, a lawyer consultant, and a lawyer. His short-term success made him arrogant. In the end, because he did not uphold justice for people and protect human rights, his legal career ended in failure. After losing his job, his shortcomings were exposed: selfish, greedy, weak, vain, discouraged, down and out, alcoholic, narrow-minded, irresponsible to his family, male chauvinism, willing to degenerate, and finally hooked up with Yu Bai's wife Luoyang, and repeatedly beat her. In fact, the novel not only describes the marriage life of Su Qing and Zhu Changshan, but also portrays the entire social reality. Please look at Zhengxing and Zijin in Lu Zun's sorrowful death and Fang Hongjian and Sun Rujia in Jin Zhongshu's fortress besieged. How similar are their endings? Their respective marriages disintegrated. Zijin committed suicide, Sun Rujia ran away, and Su Qing divorced. Although the male and female protagonists have different personalities, they all end up in the same way. The three masters also wrote about the social phenomena of the 1930s and 1940s. Faced with a society on the verge of collapse, the young intellectuals were desperate, which led to the frequent disintegration of marriages. The heroine Su Qing has a dual personality. She was born in a scholarly family in the old society. She was bound by feudal consciousness and feudal ethics. In her mind, 3 obediences and 4 virtues and 3 bonds and 5 constant virtues came from her mother, Wang Ma, who was close to her. Because Qing gave birth to daughters one after another, her life gradually changed and she was neglected by her husband's family. The taste was bitter, but she endured it. Her husband and cousin, Ruixian, had an affair. When she was sick, her husband sang romantic widow with Ruixian, but she endured it. Later, because of financial constraints, Changshan actually beat her, but she still endured it. This tolerance came entirely from the feudal morality of marrying a jikan and following the jikan. Although she met her Prince Charming in her mind, Ying Qimen, during her college days, she really loved Ying Qimen, but she could not escape the feudal ethics of a woman cannot serve 2 husbands, and finally had to break up with him. Until 10 years later, at the end of the article, she told the female doctor who was close to her that she still missed Ying Qimen. However, she was a talented student in the foreign language department of Nanjing Central University. She had accepted new Western ideas. She was enlightened, she had made progress, and she was full of vigor. Therefore, when she felt depressed in life, she wanted to rise up, including writing articles and submitting them. And the final decision: divorce. Su Qing lived in a contradictory world, wanting to break through the secular world, but also having reservations. This is the most true portrayal of Su Qing herself. Fortunately, she finally took a strong step, bid farewell to living under the shadow of Changshan, her husband, and walked towards a brand new self again. 5 later, Su Qing went to the Yu Opera Troupe as a screenwriter. Although the Bao Yu and Dai Yu she wrote was performed for more than 300 consecutive shows, setting a record for the troupe's performances, the actors and music won awards, but only the script had no chance to win awards because of her bad reputation. During the special period, she was dismissed by the troupe and sent to the coast for reform. During that period, her health deteriorated and she also suffered from lung disease. Because she had no money to treat the disease, she could only bear the pain and continue to accept the reform. Su Qing's life in her later years was also extremely miserable. She lived in a house of only 10 square meters with her divorced youngest daughter and grandchildren. Su Qing had long cut off contact with the outside world because of her illness and only wanted to die quickly. Until December 1982, before Su Qing died, she wanted to read her book 10 Years of Marriage again. After all, it recorded her tragic marriage experience and also made her the most glorious moment of her life. But she couldn't find the book after searching everywhere. In the end, she could only pass away quietly with this regret. Conclusion: it is quite touching that Su Qing and Zhang Ailing, both of whom were strange flowers in the domestic literary world at that time, had such similar life trajectories. They all came from famous families. Although Zhang Ailing lost her parents' love in her childhood, they all became famous early, and they all excelled in literature. Although their writing had nothing to do with politics, they were all involved in the whirlpool of politics for no reason. Their names were entangled with traitors. They all had an unfortunate marriage and a miserable old age. Su Qing had a close relationship with Chen Gongbo during the Wang puppet regime. Later, Chen Gongbo was shot and Su Qing was imprisoned. After liberation, she wrote many plays and was quite popular. During the Cultural Revolution, she was repeatedly attacked and criticized. In her later years, she was poor and depressed. Looking at Su Qing's life, she married a man by mistake in her best years, which caused her unfortunate 10-year marriage, and she mistakenly approached a man in the glorious period of her career, which caused her career to collapse and her reputation to be ruined. She and Zhang Ailing were originally two peerless beauties famous in Shanghai. They admired each other, but they never interacted with each other because of a man. Su Qing is just like Zhang Ailing, who is invincible unless she meets a man. But even though Su Qing has made herself a legend, she is still just one of the living beings, deeply trapped in the secular world, unable to escape from birth, aging, sickness, death, love and separation.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.